I'm going to give you an example of how policy in the U.S. has gone awry. Recently, just yesterday, the FCC announced that 3 megabytes per second uploads are still fast enough for U.S. homes. Yet at the same time, the FCC has recently auctioned C-band for nearly $81 billion. Now, if you don't know what C-band is, in 5G there's low band, mid band, and high band. The best bands for coverage and capacity are low band and mid band. And so the C band is in the mid band. It's the premier best combination of coverage and capacity spectrum there is. And the FCC just auctioned it for $81 billion. Now, who did they auction that to? They auctioned it to the same companies that told the FCC that they want to continue to provide Americans 3 megabytes per second. Now, anybody that's used the internet, anybody that's played games, anybody that's had a telecommunications conference like on Teams or Zoom knows that 3 megabytes per second in no way allows you to do the kind of work that you need to do. But yet, many in rural America still struggle with 3 megabytes per second uploads. Now, you can't telecommute. So essentially, you're relegating rural communities to the ash bin of the 21st century. And yet, you're selling the same companies precious spectrum that could be used to build the network. Now, why is this a problem? Well, because they are spending $81 billion to buy the spectrum. They will not have any money left to build a network. Essentially what they plan to do is sit on this, let it appreciate in value because it acts like a toll road for them. So they own a toll road. And then eventually it will get built when they've accumulated enough capital to do so. So the government gets $81 billion. Americans continue to struggle with low broadband speeds. And this just further demonstrates how bad we become at making policy that actually builds the country and builds productivity. Let's look at an example of how we used to do it. The Transcontinental Railroad. It was how we settled the West. It's how we unified the country. It was so important to our history. And Congress struggled to figure out how to build this thing, how to connect the country, how to really bring us into the modern age as an industrialized society. And so there was such a thing as the Pacific Railroad Act. Now, what did this do? Surprisingly enough, it did not have railroad companies pay the federal government for the right to build a railroad. In fact, it was just the other way around. What the federal government did was actually give 6,400 acres of land and $48,000 in government bonds for each mile of track the railroad built. So this incentivized the railroad company to actually build the railroad. Now, this became, how we section land for agriculture. There's a lot of things that are involved with how property is laid out because of the Pacific Railroad Act. But fundamentally, it's what got the country going. Now, compare this to what we're doing. Essentially, what the FCC has said, we want the railroad companies to pay us for the right to build the railroad. And the railroad companies are going to say, great, we would love that because we're going to just sit on it and wait till it appreciates in value. So we're not going to get high-speed internet, 5G built in this country by selling the right to build. What we are going to do, the way we unleash productivity is to basically give the spectrum to the companies that are willing to build the infrastructure. And so if you build infrastructure, you get spectrum. If you don't build infrastructure, you don't get spectrum. It's common sense. It's how we built this country. And it's what's wrong with Washington, D.C. today. Thanks for sticking to the end. Make sure to leave comments below, like and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future posts. I really love having you stealth warriors here.